Alright guys, another day, another strength, and I got another video for you guys today. Today we're going to be talking about my top 3 bench press accessory movements for strength. So let's get right into it. Alright, I'll go down from 3 to 1, then I'll talk about honorable mentions, talk about why these lifts work, what tends to work, and what tends to not work at the end as well. Alright, so best bench accessories for strength. Number 3, we got barbell rows, or just any row in general, honestly. Cable rows, dumbbell rows, horizontal pulls, right? That's what I'm talking about. Rows right here. Builds a big, strong back. Very important for benching because it's your stable platform from which you can push and send the barbell up to the heavens, soaring straight up into outer space, right? It keeps the shoulders healthy, right? Basically just prevents overuse from the bench because you can sprinkle this bad boy in there. You're going to work the shoulder joint through the inverse range of motion and work the antagonistic muscle groups, right? So you're going to have balance in the shoulder. You're not just going to be doing the same thing all the time. So really good for that. But yeah, that's basically it for number 3, the rows. Number 2, right? The overhead press. And I'll explain this one a bit more at the end. But huge overhead press fan, right? I love the overhead press. It allows for a greater range of motion as compared to the bench, right? Trains the same muscles as the bench, but it biases the weaker prime movers of the bench, which are the front delts and the triceps, right? So really huge. We love that. So it's basically like doing a hard mode bench, right? And then it also, as does the row, it keeps the shoulders nice and healthy, right? Because you're working the entire shoulder joint, the front delt and the rear delt. You're working the side delt a little bit even. But yeah, you're working a lot of the upper back using the traps in the press with the lockout, right? Shrugging up at the top. So yeah, circumvents a lot of those shoulder issues in the bench for those same reasons. And then number 1, my favorite, personal favorite bench press accessory movement is the close grip bench, right? So this one, I put it at number 1 because this can replace the bench in training as the main movement. So you could do exactly the same things you can do with the bench press. You can do singles, you can do triples, you can do 5s, you can do anything essentially with 100% carryover as well, because the close grip bench press is harder than the bench press, and you can basically use it the same way. So like if your close grip bench goes up, let's say you're benching 300 right now, get your close grip bench to 300 and your bench is just going to go up by default, right? Without even having to practice it. Now obviously you have to practice the bench to maximize the bench strength, but even without doing flat bench with normal grip at all, it's going to go up, right? So if used in conjunction with the bench, so this is like a little asterisk right here. So if you have the bench in your program already, you guys know I'm a fan of varying the movement pattern, right? If you're also doing a close grip bench that's just 2 horizontal presses, I prefer to do a close grip incline bench with like a 15 to 30 degree incline. That way you have variation in the movement pattern. But yeah, close grip bench is really the holy grail of bench presses, in my opinion. It's the most balanced bench press because you're using the triceps, the front delt, and the pec in a pretty balanced fashion. My hot take is that people think the close grip bench is triceps dominant. I would say it's actually not, it's just balanced overall. And the flat bench with the normal grip is actually just much more pec and front delt dominant, right? So yeah, trains all the muscles evenly. That's great, we love that. And then also, just like the press and the rows, the most common issue with bench pressing is like shoulder issues, most common injury rather. So close grip benching is going to avoid a lot of those shoulder issues due to that evenly distributed stress. Cool. So yeah, bench in general is the main lift as far as the bench, the squat, the overhead press, and the deadlift. This is the one that benefits the most from variety. So you can get away with doing the least specific movements, it's going to help you the most. So some of the honorable mentions here, we have the incline bench. And I put in the overhead press over the incline bench because I think it takes care of the same things that the incline bench does, except it is more of, it gets more of the rear delt as well in the traps, so it's more of the whole shoulder, right? So like the reason that it's in there is because, well, a couple of reasons, but number 1 is that it helps with the shoulder health. Number 2, it allows for a greater range of motion, and it trains the same muscles as the bench, but biases the weaker muscles, the delts and the triceps. So it biases the delts and the triceps more than the incline bench, and it also has a longer range of motion than the incline bench. So that's why I like the overhead press in that slot. But incline bench obviously still works great. So all of the lifts on this honorable mentions list are going to work well. So you can you can't go wrong with using them essentially. So incline bench, then we have chin-ups. So basically the same thing as rows, but just less specific, right? So same thing with the press and the incline bench with the rows and the chins. We have upright rows. I like that one a lot. It's going to work the shoulder. It's very, very easy to throw into your program because it doesn't require a lot of recovery costs. You can do it all the time. Another honorable mention is the dips. So these are, the reason I didn't include dips is because they are very heavy and very similar to the bench press in terms of the prime movers. So it's kind of difficult to fit them in if you're doing a heavy bench already, right? So the whole point of this is that you're using the bench as your main movement. So nothing wrong with using the dip as your main movement and then including like some kind of lighter flat bench as well. But you can't really make a dip that much lighter. I mean, I guess if you're already strong, you can do like very high rep dips. But if you're doing that, there are more useful exercises, I would say, like doing a lot of tricep work, which we'll get to in a moment. The dead bench, that one's also a good one, but same kind of issue as the dips, where it's tough to incorporate that with the flat bench as your main movement, because that's also kind of like a main movement. So one way to get around all this is to use like a conjugate setup where you're rotating the main movement. So you can have like your close grip, like I said, you can have your dead bench, you can include another movement on this list is the overload bench. So that could be a slingshot, block press, board press, floor press, that sort of thing, right? So any of those, any like partial or overload bench press is gonna work in there. But yeah, triceps work, that's like, you know, top of the food chain there for bench, right? It's super easy to recover from. You can hammer the heck out of your triceps every single time that you're doing an upper body day. So you get plenty of specific triceps work from pressing and benching already. But you know, just because it's so easy to recover from, there's like no downside to doing tricep work essentially. So you can just hammer a bunch of that. Similarly, rear delt work, same sort of thing. So you're gonna get plenty of rear delt work if you're doing vertical and horizontal pulls, but you can, you know, just hammer the rear delts. They're gonna recover very well. There's no downside to doing rear delt work, aside from the time that it takes, right? Another one similar is lat work. You can include stuff like pullovers and straight arm pull downs / push downs. So if you're already doing, you know, horizontal and vertical pulls, you're gonna get a lot of lat work, but you can take it a step further and add those in. And then couple other ones are Larson press. These are actually pretty easy to incorporate. I just don't think they have anything like that unique where they should be in the top 3, you know, bald omni-man, seething RN, sorry bro. But yeah, I think Larson presses are very useful. Like I definitely use them, but they just don't crack my top 3 personally. And then lastly, this one, the biceps, right? So the biceps cross 2 joints, the elbows, right? So you get your flexion right here, everyone thinks of the curls, but then they also cross the shoulder joint. And at that joint, the bicep is responsible for shoulder flexion and humeral adduction, which is the same thing as the pec. So it's basically like you have a second set of weaker pecs in having biceps, right? So if you make your biceps stronger, so let's say you've never trained your biceps, you can go train your biceps, and then they're actually gonna contribute a little bit to your bench press too. So, and same thing as like the triceps and rear delts, there's not really a downside to training your biceps directly. You can recover very well. So it's not gonna help like a ton, but it is gonna help, and there's no downside to doing it really, aside from the time it takes to do the movements. But yeah, so that's basically it for the honorable mentions. There's other stuff that works too. These are just like some that I personally like. And as you can see, the bench press right here is the one that benefits the most from variety. So none of the other main lifts are gonna have this many movements that carry over to it. That's specific to the bench. And so I didn't really include anything that doesn't work because that should be kind of like obvious. But basically anything that's not a pressing or pulling movement is not gonna work well. But yeah, the bare minimum for bench, in my opinion, is, like I listed here, a horizontal press, which would be the bench press. You have a vertical press, like the overhead press, and then a horizontal pull, like the barbell row, a seal row, any kind of, you know, cable row, whatever. But ideally, you're gonna wanna have all of those and then also include an incline press, a vertical pull, and then copious amounts of tricep and rear delt work, and then some biceps work too, I would recommend. So if you're doing all of those, you're basically covering all your movement patterns for the bench press. So that's gonna be, just to reiterate, horizontal press, which is the bench, incline press, vertical press, right? I don't think a decline press is totally necessary for getting a big bench. They're fun to do. They're probably useful for physique, but we're just talking about bench right now. And then as far as pulls, you have horizontal, incline, and vertical pulls. I recommend all those. And then elbow flexion for the triceps, and then shoulder external rotation for the rear delt, right? That sort of thing. But yeah, that's basically it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, say something in the comments. Let me know what kind of lifts you want to see next, and I'll see you guys in the next video. All right, goodbye.